So you're buying a project car. The question is, what car should you choose for your project? So I'm going to pass on the advice that I wish I was given when I started out looking for project cars and buying them. And we're going to look at topics like insurance and some of the things that we really need to be aware when it comes to choosing an insurer and notifying them about mods that we've done. We're going to look at choosing a car that's suitable for a car project. And we're also going to look at engines, because some engines give really good returns for the money that you spend on them, and other engines give very little in terms of power gains. So stay tuned to the end and we'll show you how to get the very best value for your money when it comes to choosing a project car. Hello, I'm Wayne from TorqueCars. One of the questions we get asked most often is, what is a good project car? And that question, you could go anywhere with that. There is no single answer to the best project car. It depends who you are, it depends what you want and what your aims are. So for someone starting out driving, it's often a case of getting a car that's fairly cheap to insure. And generally speaking, small, light cars are cheaper to insure. So you would get a car that you can insure cheaply. You need to bear in mind though that as soon as you start modifying a car, you can have problems getting insurance. When you sign up for insurance, most companies ask you if you've modified the car in any way. And that doesn't just mean when you buy the car. If you make changes to the car through the term of that policy, you still have a duty to notify the insurer of those changes. And depending on what you've done and the insurer concerned, you may have to pay an extra premium because they perceive it as a greater risk. Or in some cases, insurance companies may completely refuse to insure the car. So do your research carefully. If you're planning to buy a first car and modify it, look at the insurance and just make sure the company you go with are flexible enough to take into account the fact that you're going to be doing modifications. And most first modifications are fairly simple. It's usually alloy wheels, induction kit, exhaust and suspension. So it's not going to be significant power mods. Most drivers starting out will just look to improve the handling characteristics of their car and make it more fun to drive. So we've got another group of people that just want an interesting project car. They might be more mechanically minded and more advanced, and they'll be looking at maybe doing engine swaps or significant engine work. Now, if that's you, you really need to find an engine that is solid, reliable and has a big range of aftermarket parts that you can choose from. There are some very obscure engines out there that have reasonably good power figures, but when it comes to finding upgrades for them, it's a nightmare. Not many people modify those cars, they're so rare, and you're blazing your own trail, so you've got to do a lot of research and development yourself. So choosing an engine and a car that is popular and popular with modifiers and tuners can really pay dividends in the long run. So look at the parts available for each of the engines you're considering and just make sure that you have a big pool of parts to choose from when you start your project. You really don't want to find that out further down the line after you've committed to buying the car. So we've also seen people look to do extensive bodywork modifications to the car. And if that's the case, then technically you don't need a car with perfect bodywork if the bumpers and wings are a little bit shabby and you plan to rip them off anyway. It's a great way of getting a cheap project car to work from. And instead of just replacing the parts with standard parts, you can actually design the car and build up the car that you actually want. Now, one of the most important things I would always say to someone looking for a car tuning project is that when you start adding parts to an engine, the gains you get are cumulative, and it depends on the power you start with. So think of each mod as adding a percentage of power to your car. So if you've got a 70 brake horsepower car and you add lots of mods to get another 10%, you're only going to make 77 brake horsepower, which isn't a lot considering those parts, for argument's sake, will say they cost about £700. If you have a car that has 200 brake horsepower, for the same outlay, you can still get a 10% power increase, but you're looking at another 20 horsepower. So that's a significant gain and you're getting a much better return on the money that you invest. So look for engines that have decent power figures to start with, because as you add parts, you'll get a lot more from those parts that you add than you would if the engine was a more basic one. And I really love turbocharged cars. If a car has a turbo, they're very easy to modify. Something as simple as a remap can add about 30 to 40% of extra power to the car before you even start doing other mods. So it gives you a terrific basis to work from. And most turbo engines are generally stronger than the naturally aspirated counterparts because they're working under higher pressures, and to maintain reliability, the manufacturers have over-engineered the different components of the engine. Think also about what you're going to be doing with the car. If you're using a car on the track regularly and in competition, you probably don't want to buy a car that has really expensive parts. I've seen quite a few people get caught out. They've bought a bargain luxury high-end car. Every time they take it out on the track and damage something, the repair bill is extortionate. So look at popular cars that have fairly low replacement cost. Personally, I quite like Audis because you're looking at the Volkswagen, Skoda, Seat parts bin. So most of the parts for an Audi are readily available for so many other models of cars, so they're relatively cheap to repair and replace. And also, if you've got a good breakers yard near you and they specialise in, say, Japanese cars or American cars or Ford or Buick, whatever they do, if they're a specialist and they're near to you, you've got access to a ready supply of replacement parts should something fail or go wrong. So depending on where you live, that can also have a bearing on your decision as to what would make a good project car. We've got quite a few articles on our site as well about great project cars in different budgets, and we look at some quite oddball suggestions that maybe people overlook. Now, you wouldn't necessarily have thought of getting a diesel car as your first car, but actually diesels are fairly cheap to insure. They nearly always come with a turbo, and with a simple remap you can dramatically increase the power that they offer. So if you've not looked into it, think outside the box. Don't get what all of your mates are getting. Look at the statistics, power figures, the insurance groups, and also what's available for these cars, so you can get some upgrades fairly cheaply and end up with a really impressive car. So we really hope this video has been useful and informative to you. If you've not subscribed, please do so, and don't forget to stay tuned.